throughout his career, different stages in his career, he had access to good budgets on maybe 6 or 7 features, different movies from the 60s through to the late 80s. He had an occasional shot at a big movie. And were those movies particularly better? Well, they had a slightly more extensive cast maybe, or had 1 or 2 name actors in them, but were they really the best Jess Franco movies just because they were the most expensive ones? Not for me anyway. I much prefer his mid-range or even slightly cheaper movies where he was a bit more with his back against the wall and had to pull things out of his hat just to make the movie happen with almost nothing, which I don't see him so much as a production value filmmaker, although he had his ways of making his movies look bigger than they actually were. But still, I think he was more of a, let's roll with it and trust the viewer to fill in the blanks, or trust the viewer to understand that this is just a movie. This isn't, reality here. He also used nudity to patch up, narrative gaps in his movies. And if he saw that, that he ran out of money for action scenes or there was not enough time to shoot the rest of the plot, I think he was happy to just get a couple of actors on a bed or, in a swimming pool, just roll the camera on them so they're frolicking around, and he would just gain enough running time. It's interesting that sometimes there is lots of nudity in his films and it's not super hard, but then there is other scenes which are very erotically charged where people aren't even involved in sex. People just maybe look at each other a certain way, or there is that sort of editing, and Franco positions the camera to show this kind of charge between the characters. And I think he was, in a way, he was a maestro also of cheapskate erotica and things like that. He was quite good at it, but not necessarily in traditional sex scenes, because those can be quite boring and routine in his films. So yeah, he's an odd one. So Jess Franco made anything between 120, 150 films, depending how you count them. It's not easy to sort of tally his cinematic achievements, but we are definitely well over 100 feature films. How did he do that? Well, there is several moments we have to kind of bear in mind. And first of all is that he remade his plots later with different actors with a slightly different genre twist, but he kind of revisited his basic favorite plot devices or even some characters again and again throughout his prolific career. So there were the basic building blocks and he would just fall back on them. This creates this kind of concentric circles throughout his cinematography where you can tell, this is a strand. I saw this in a black and white movie 25 years ago, but now it's in a completely trashy punk aesthetic, shot in a different place, in a different language, but it's the same basic underlying hero journey. Vampirus Lesbos, Oasis of the Zombies, Dr. Orlov, Awful Dr. Orlov. He remade each of these later in his career to some extent. He wouldn't call the movie with the same title, but he basically took those film structures and reused them. The only movie of his I can think of which is a good movie and he didn't try and remake it, as far as I know, is A Virgin Among the Living Dead. So maybe he was really quite happy with the way it turned out. So he didn't try and revamp it in a different style. If you've seen enough Jess Franco films, you would have spotted his writing credits as adapted from a novel by David Kuhn or Kuhn. Nobody's ever seen those novels and I doubt they ever existed. I think this might be Jess Franco's claim at legitimizing his films, or maybe he was able to get some rebates from during the production if he was to pass the movie off as an adaptation. We'll never know why exactly he went back again and again to this pseudonym, but it's fascinating to see that name again and again and again, very different films, and thinking if that novel were to exist, oh my god, I would have loved to read it. What would it have been like? Would it have anything similar with the movie we saw? There are also these recurring characters in Jess Franco films, the most famous one being, I guess, Dr. Orlov, who in the first incarnation was Howard Vernon. Already in the second Dr. Orlov movie, there is a completely random character named Dr. Orlov who looks nothing like the character from the first movie, is played by a different actor, and doesn't serve as the main villain anymore. And then Dr. Orlov keeps coming back way into at least 1990s, I guess, and If it's a Dr. Olaf film, it doesn't mean there is an internal coherence between them, apart from him being this basic mad scientist character straight out of Georges Franju's Eyes Without a Face. So Dr. Olaf is this plastic surgeon, at least in the original film he is, but sometimes he's just a background character, and there are at least, I think, 5 or 6 Dr. Olaf movies. Then another typical recurring name is Radek in Jess Franco universe. Also there is Inspector Tanner, there is his assistant Malou. Those characters again can pop up in very different scenarios, and of course we can't forget Al Pereira, played by Eddie Constantine, or he was played by Antonio Mayans a number of times. He's a kind of a private eye, but depending on the scenario he's in, he can also be very different. He can mutate and show a more tragic side, a more cynical side, or a more humorous side to him. So those kind of echoes make Jess Franco films, it's like a hall of mirrors. It's trying to draw those parallels, makes you go back to his films to try and establish some kind of order in this mosaic. It's like this huge mosaic which was never properly finished or was never meant to be explicitly readable. So yeah, it would also be strange to bring Jess Franco up and not talk about sex a little bit. And in his movies, he's a bit ahead of his time in the way he shows bodies. So there is a lot of nudity in his films, and some of it is obligatory just to make sure the film fits the bill and gets released on the market at the time. But his approach to showing people's bodies is very indiscriminate. Like, he never tries to prettify his actors, or rarely tries to prettify his actors. So you see a lot of pimples and spots and kind of very unflattering close-ups of even his favorite actors. He was never really discriminating about what people's appearance is like. I don't think Jess Franco was such a poet of the perfect human form or traditional intercourse. He was also interested in some strange kind of practices, and I think he was quite liberal, and he liked sex, but he didn't need sex to be very beautiful and glamorous. He just liked sex and sexual topics. It's been about 10 years since Jess Franco died, so it's amazing how many films of his have been restored, remastered, and brought out in Blu-ray and UHD. I mean, these past 10 years have been a bit of a Jess Franco renaissance, and it's a shame Jess is not around. I'm sure he would have appreciated, and he would have been happy to record more of those interviews of his to go with these new releases. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and let me know what your favorite Jess Franco films are. Bye bye.